I had debated making a video about this as an elected official, but I think that given the week that elected officials who've asked tough questions to police have had, I'm someone who believes in prison and police abolition. I support mutual aid. I support anti-fascists. I appreciate all the work that anarchists and communists do in our community. I know that Portlanders call 911 on houseless people every 15 minutes just for existing outside.
Here's the thing. I don't know what you kids are up to, but I do know one thing. Laws are threats made by the dominant socioeconomic ethnic group in a given nation. It's just a promise of violence that's enacted, and police are basically an occupying army. You know what I mean?
I saw a comment the other day that said that police abolition doesn't actually mean abolition, or that the police will be removed entirely, that there will still be some of them. And I just want to say that's not true. Police abolition means police abolition. And given what the Community Free Store PDX has experienced this week, and given the fact that we are in tough budget discussions where we have to really narrowly look at our resources, I think this has to be addressed. Councilor Canal and I both sit on the Community and Public Safety Committee, and last week, Councilor Canal brought forward a small language change that would address bias language within the Community Police Oversight Board.
The document would initiate a conversation over 3 small changes to city code. One, creating more clarity around the bias, which would preclude a community member from serving on the board. This bias standard is applied by the nominating committee when reviewing applicants, some of whom they'll send on to council for council consideration and appointment. In the event that there's a question over whether or not an appointed member is too biased to serve, the standard is used by council when deciding whether or not to remove someone. To create clarity, the language proposed is derived from Oregon state law for juror bias, a standard which is widely accepted and used. It would also alter the number of community members on the nominating committee from the current law, which says 5 community members on the initial nominating committee and 4 on subsequent ones, to the inverse, 4 on the initial nominating committee and 5 on the subsequent ones. So ensure we're able to be compliant with our law this year without delaying implementation of the nominating committee. It will also increase community representation. Finally, it would change the rule that council must appoint community members in trios, with the 3 councilors from each district picking 1 community member each, and allow council to change how to appoint community members. In the short term, it wouldn't change how the nominating committee members are selected, but would allow council to come up with a system later.
Councilor Canal was concerned that the word bias was undefined. So when we're recruiting people to sit on the Police Accountability Board, does that mean that we're going to exclude people who have tried to hold police accountable in the past, people who have said Black Lives Matter, that sort of thing?
I'm left to wonder why language that encourages additional bias is being touted as more fair. I look at the original language and it's very clear that no bias was what was previously written into code, and I think that sounds like a good thing. I find it alarmingly strange, frankly, that the ACLU of Oregon comes to testify in favor of such an incorporation of bias into a city code. I find that very strange. This has made me more skeptical of what is happening here right now. To me, this is coming off as staff who had a bias perspective in the previous exercise, who are upset with the previous council and their decision to make the nomination committee less biased and be more nimble and more respectful of the district councilors to now try once again to change their plan back into what the staff wanted and didn't get their way last year. So I'm not thrilled with that, because the previous language would have kept activists and advocates who have a strong position and thought on either side they want to get on this. And I find that deeply troubling. And I find that original language cutting out a lot of the activists, the thing the public was looking for in an oversight committee. So I will be a no vote in this, and I think the whole council should be a no vote in this.
The police union showed up in full force, said that this was setting a precedent for the city council to renegotiate contracts with unions that were already set.
Thank you all. Aaron Schmaltz, I'm the president of the Portland Police Association. I want to open by saying it's against my nature to have this conversation in this setting. I've met with all of you and told you that I really do feel like having these conversations before we get to this setting is a better way to navigate with my members. They're concerned, they see these things, and they ask that I act. I know I need to be brief, so that today I will simply state that for any fair-minded Portlander, and particularly for all those who support labor and bargaining rights, that put simply, if the city's handshake at the bargaining table is as good as the changing whim of the next election, then no contract is safe. This proposal is an unlawful attempt to force the PPA and its members back to the table at the stroke of midnight. It is on its face an unfair and unjust attempt to force a presupposed outcome. This is clear in the language. It demands that the city bargain something substantially similar to its desired outcome. That is not bargaining, that is informing the PPA and its members that it shall accept the demand. Even worse, it closes by stating that the desired outcome is that proposed discipline is upheld. Not correct, not just, upheld. This is, of course, ironic, because over the last 15 years, the PPA and its members have had discipline proposed over approximately 300 times. We have taken those cases to arbitration 14 times, 4%, with a 75% win rate. Why? Because we don't arbitrate cases unless there's evidence the city broke the law. What does that mean? Over the last 15 years, 97% of the discipline proposed by the city has been completed without any arbitration or argument from the PPA. This is not evidence of a broken system. This is evidence that we're breaking a system which works. And it would appear that some would stop at nothing, including breaking faith with labor to do so. In a recent interview, the author of this proposal stated, Constitutional, equitable, accountable policing is effective policing. Couldn't agree more. Which is why the Portland Police Bureau's members provide it every single day. Our members are held to an extremely high standard every day. And the only certainty is that beyond that is this: if the city chooses to engage in performative brinksmanship and destroy even the hint that it is bargaining in good faith and continue to move the goalpost at every possible turn, our highly trained, professional, constitutional, accountable police officers will be hired by other local agencies. We've walked down this road before. Our police officers are no different than any other city employee. They're human beings. They have failings, they have strengths, they have weaknesses. They're confronted every day with the greatest tragedies that our city sees, and the system in which they provide service has been built by, molded, and reformed by all who are here and all who have come before them. You will not find any group in America more willing to grow, change, and transform the dynamic between themselves and those they serve. The thesis that they are root and stem, the source of a problem, is simply untrue. Our community, the whole community, is crying for more connection, more relationship, and more support from our public servants. Even as we speak right now, dozens of calls are waiting for an answer.
I apologize. We're going to have to really enforce strict time limits in order to get through this. I apologize.
What I understand is that this would have to be, the bargaining contract would have to be opened up again because it was already settled last year, correct?
Yes, we would have to go to the union and request if they would bargain this language and be willing to do that. They have to agree to it because we did just bargain this language. And if they say, no, we already bargained the language we wanted, then that's our answer. If they're willing to talk about it because they find some benefit in defining bias, then we'll negotiate it. But it will require us.
They could actually say no, and this would all be over.
That's right.
Okay. There it is right there. Putting something on the agenda to make a point when you actually know and expect to have a huge number of people here testifying is disingenuous to say that you didn't know that this would be this popular. Secondly, to put this on and send it to the full council after listening to Aaron Schmott say that his people, they don't like this, and you get a vote and you're going to put it on the agenda, and all it's going to do is go back to their people in the union, and they're going to say they don't want it. So why are you wasting the council's time if this is only going to be knocked down again? And so I'm not understanding why we're doing this. If it was just to have this conversation again and bring it up and to put people on record, that to me is not a good use of our time.
Even though this was a very minor language tweak that would just ask bias to actually be defined.
3 small changes.
While I want to believe that everyone is capable of growth and change, we also have to address the history of the Portland Police Union and how they interact with elected officials who push back on them. Back in 1985, Bud Clark became the mayor of Portland. And at 88 years old, he recounted his first meeting with the police union. This is his quote. "The first thing Stan Peters did was reach around behind him, pull out his gun from underneath his shirt, and put it on the table between us. It was him establishing, hey, I'm Stan Peters, you better pay attention to me. And I think he did it every time I met with him." And this isn't new. Just last year, a precinct commander for Portland Police Bureau got in trouble because she went to a neighborhood town hall in her uniform on city time and dime, and she talked smack about the current DA at the time, Mike Schmidt.
But I can't control that. Who controls that is you. Because when the DA's office asks what you want done, you need to send emails to the district attorney and phone calls to the district attorney. When the vote comes up again, because the reality is he won the vote with over 70% of the people, you have to vote no, right? And you have to vote. Because the other piece of that, and I don't quote me on the number because this is just what I was told, only about 30% of the city of Portland actually votes.
So the business is going to go in the street?
You mean the drugs? Yes. So drugs have been decriminalized in the state of Oregon.
So how when like my kids is on the outside and the guy's just like shit in the hands, that's like...
It is not decriminalized. It is not illegal anymore.
And this is the question for probably half of us here is we have kids, and honestly, we can't feel safe to let them go in even our yards for fear of stepping on a needle. And I'm guessing that's most of us here. So if you can't do anything, what can we do?
So that's going back to the city, right? And having a conversation with the city about what your expectations are and where money is going, right? So the city has to determine what, we only have a finite amount of money. With COVID right now, we even have a less finite amount of money. And the question is, where do you want that to go, right? So do you want that to go to law enforcement, which we need some of it, but it's not for all of it? Do you want it to go to social services for homeless? Well, then my question to you would be, do you ask them where they spend that money? Where is that money going? Because there's a whole lot of money that goes to homeless right now, right? Like a lot.
You have a more nice cars, like me. It's like a Mercedes, BMWs.
Yeah.
So that's like, okay, so that guy's not having money, and I working hard. I working every morning. So that guy's in the night just noisy.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you.
No,
I'm saying to you that it unfortunately isn't a police solvable problem. It's a city of Portland problem. Right.
Many viewed Mike Schmidt as a police reform DA, and it went so far as to have his address leaked where his wife and his children live.
How to cite your sources.
I will also personally never forget that Commissioner Jo Ann Hardesty, who was the first Black city councilwoman who was tough on police accountability issues, was framed by the head of the police union for a hit and run that she did not commit.
Well, instead of going to trial, Hardesty, the police union, and 2 officers have settled for $680,000, according to OPB. Hardesty's lawsuit followed that 2021 case in which a driver initially wrongly told a 911 dispatcher that Hardesty rear-ended her car and drove away. Then police union president Brian Hunsaker leaked the allegation to the Oregonian. A police investigation determined Hardesty was not involved. Hardesty said the leak was a racist and politically motivated attempt to smear her reputation. She sued the city, the police union, Hunsaker, and Carrie Ottoman, another PPB officer involved in the leak.
So I lay all of that out to give context for what we as elected officials went through this week. Because Councilor Canal had the audacity to ask tough questions of the police bureau, there were 5 officers who showed up in uniform on city time and dime to his town hall. They showed up wearing police union hats, and I want to note that the North Precinct is quite small. So they sent 5 officers there during a day shift to stand at the back of this town hall and just watch what was happening. As for me, just a few days ago, I was invited to speak at a church in Montevilla in my district, and when I showed up, there were already 2 cop cars outside. Me and my chief of staff thought that was a little bit strange because we had not heard that they were going to be attending this event, but we went inside anyways, and when we went inside, we saw people mingling. It was a pretty small crowd, about 15 people, and there were 2 officers in full uniform standing at the back, not talking to anybody, not shaking hands, not doing any of the things that would indicate to me that they were there on a community policing engagement. I have been to plenty of events where police are doing community engagement, and usually, even when I was a candidate, they would walk up to me, they would shake my hand, they would tell me their name, they would be very warm and friendly to indicate that they were there to build relationships. That's really not what was happening here. They were standing by themselves in the back in like a dark corner. And I asked the pastor who had invited me, did you guys ask for these officers to be here? And he said no. He thought that they had been there for me because I'm an elected official. So I went up to them and I said, hey, are you guys allowed to be here in city uniforms with city cars and resources? Is this part of your duties? And they seemed confused by the question, said that a lieutenant had directed them to be there. And I asked, who's the lieutenant that directed you to be here? They refused to answer me, and then they just left. Given the fact that we had just had a very tense situation in the Public Safety Committee meeting.
Using our time in this manner to put forth this pressure in an already settled agreement is really not time well spent.
And given the fact that I knew what they had done to Councilor Canal already, with 5 officers showing up to his town hall, lurking in the back in the same way.
The overarching thing I hear is not the claim or view that Portland's policing is fundamentally broke, but instead that the community wants to be heard and understood by the police. They want regular engagement. They want police officers that reflect the diversity that exists in their community. In a phrase, they want community policing.
If their intention was to do community engagement, the impact was not that. It did not make me feel engaged. It did not make me feel safe. It made me feel monitored. And you do not have to be a fucking martial artist to go head to head with a police officer. And frankly, we've seen protesters that do much more than that with much less power.
What's a scam that's become so normalized that we don't even realize it's a scam anymore?
Funding police and prisons to address crime. And that brings me to what I saw with the Community Free Store PDX this week. For folks that don't know, Community Free Store PDX is a mutual aid effort. They do things like hand out clothes, COVID tests and hygiene kits, and just basic necessities like food for our unhoused population. According to the Community Free Store PDX's posts, they were there setting up and getting ready to distribute materials when a bunch of officers descended upon them and forcefully put hands on them to make them stop. Multiple people who were there confirmed to me that there were at least 11 cop cars, and some people counted as many as 20 officers on foot. Our current city council is inheriting a horrific budget. We have a $93 million budget deficit, and we are looking into cutting core services and including things that people really love, like parks. So when I see that there are multiple police officers who are showing up to just watch town halls and not participate or do community engagement, they're showing up to my town halls after I've also asked tough questions, and they're rolling in 11 cop cars and maybe 20 officers deep to make sure that they're intervening on people handing out free food and hygiene kits, I have to ask where all of the police money is going, because they constantly come before us and testify that they don't have enough money, they don't have enough patrol, and yet this is how I'm seeing resources be used. I think as city councilors, we're going to have to do a deeper investigation of this, because this is not an appropriate use of city funds, especially when they are constantly putting out messaging that we are in dire straits when it comes to patrol and people aren't getting their calls answered in a timely manner. I waited to respond to this comment because I knew the city budget was coming out soon. Mayor Wheeler is one of those people that's like socially liberal but fiscally conservative, which means he thinks your identity is valid, but he's not going to do anything to support the social programs that could help you. There should not be 5 police officers showing up to a community town hall. You can send 1 or 2 to do that community engagement. It just doesn't make sense, and it's hard for me to read it as anything other than intimidation. So I just want you all to know that city councilors are watching. I am watching very closely how community members are being treated.
You know, this resolution is really, it's got a lot of strengths to it.
Sir, apologies.
If you do go forward, you need to look at both oversight of the budget. It's going to be more than $15 million to fund this new experimental oversight. And that you also do.
Thank you, Mr. I'm sorry, we really have to enforce the time limits.
Chair, I'm troubled, frankly, by the technology issues, the cutting off. I feel like the temperature in this room has skyrocketed on an item I feel like we need ample time to get into. I don't know how we vote when this is already, we're 3 testimonies in already.
So I plead today that you do not cut our public safety or our officers who serve our community. If I call 911, I want a real person, not a recording. I'm a real person. I'm a real person with grief from this. I do not want anyone else to feel the pain from the failure of our city. Give us life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which is in our Constitution. Public safety is a fundamental right. I'm a law-abiding citizen, and I do not want to take and put things into my own.
Well, we are live from Northwest Portland reporting on the garbage issues we're seeing here today. As you can see, the city is falling apart. Because at the last job I worked at a place where I talked to a lot of folks from the Laurelhurst neighborhood. For those of you who aren't from Portland, the Laurelhurst neighborhood is like one of those gorgeous rich people neighborhoods that poor people walk through and they think, oh my gosh, that's the house I would take over during the zombie apocalypse. Anyways, these motherfuckers who live there spent every fucking day of their lives blaming houseless people in our community for stolen items and stolen catalytic converters. And what do you know? It turns out it wasn't houseless people in Portland at all. It was a literal organized crime ring. I'm gonna need every last rich person who made unfounded claims against houseless people to issue a public apology. Even if houseless people were contracted by people who are well off organizing this crime ring, do you not understand power dynamics and how that works? If they are contracting out people who have literally nothing to steal so that they can get paid some money while they're running a multi-million-dollar operation, obviously it's still not the houseless people's fault for falling prey to other people who have more power than them. Come on. I'm watching how my colleagues are being treated. And I'm watching how we are using your tax dollars as effectively as possible. And I'm going to be asking some very tough questions about the police budget in the months to come. Because I'm quite literally a police and prison abolitionist, which means that I think that they shouldn't exist in the first place. So no, that video wasn't saying that I want more police. It was pointing out how useless they are. So anyways, I present this to you with no comment.